Good morning. I want to start with a question. Have you ever said something in the heat of the moment, something you later regretted? Maybe it was to a colleague, a friend, or even someone you love, and as soon as the words left your mouth, you wished you could take them back. See, anger is a natural response. It's built into us. It's our brain's way of defending us from threats. But here's the problem. Most of the time, the threats we perceive aren't real threats. They're challenges, obstacles, or just moments of discomfort. Yet, our brain reacts as if we're in danger. But here's the good news. We have a choice. The difference between reacting with anger and responding with calm is not about who we are. It's about what we practice. Because great leaders, great thinkers, and great human beings don't let anger control them. They learn how to control their response. And today, I want to talk about how we can do exactly that, how we can reframe anger, slow it down, and choose calm so we can show up as the best version of ourselves, even in the most challenging moments. Because when we learn to master our emotions, we don't just become better at handling conflict. We become better at leading, better at connecting, and better at inspiring the people around us. So let's dive in. Let's talk about how to stay calm when anger tries to take over. Anger doesn't appear out of nowhere. It has a source, a trigger. The problem is that most of us react before we even realize what set us off. Our heart rate spikes, our breathing becomes shallow, and before we know it, words or actions escape that we can't take back. But what if we could catch anger before it takes over? The key lies in recognizing the trigger. Every person has different triggers. Some are external, like a rude comment, an unfair situation, or someone disrespecting our time. Others are internal, like exhaustion, insecurity, or unresolved past experiences. When we fail to recognize these triggers, we fall into a cycle of reacting automatically. But awareness gives us power. When we understand what ignites our anger, we create the space to choose how we respond. Recognizing triggers requires mindfulness. It starts with paying attention to patterns. What situations repeatedly frustrate you? What words or behaviors from others set off an immediate emotional response? Sometimes it's not the obvious trigger, but something deeper. A comment that seems minor might bring back memories of being dismissed in the past. An ignored message might feel like rejection, triggering old wounds. These are patterns worth noticing. Physical awareness also plays a role. Anger is not just a mental state, it's a physiological reaction. Tightening in the chest, clenching fists, a racing heartbeat, these are signals. Noticing them in the moment gives us an early warning system. The sooner we recognize these signs, the more control we have over the outcome. Recognizing a trigger doesn't mean suppressing emotions, it means acknowledging them before they control us. It's about stepping back and seeing the full picture rather than being consumed by the moment. When we do that, we gain clarity, and with clarity comes control. Pause before reacting. A moment of silence can prevent a lifetime of regret. Anger demands an immediate response. It pushes us to act, to defend, to retaliate. But the moment we give in, we lose control. We say things we don't mean, make decisions we later regret, and allow temporary emotions to create permanent damage. The most powerful thing we can do when anger arises is to pause. Pausing is not about suppressing anger. It's about creating space between the emotion and the reaction. That space, just a few seconds, can make all the difference. When we pause, we shift from reacting impulsively to responding intentionally. This small act interrupts the emotional hijack happening in our brain, allowing our rational mind to catch up. Think of it like hitting the pause button on a heated conversation. When something upsets us, our first instinct is often to respond immediately. But if we take a breath, count to 5, or even take a sip of water before speaking, we give ourselves a moment to assess whether our reaction aligns with the outcome we truly want. More often than not, that short break is enough to prevent us from saying something we'd later regret. Pausing also allows us to observe the situation objectively. Instead of being swept away by emotions, we can ask ourselves, is this worth my energy? Am I making assumptions? What's the best way to handle this? These questions bring clarity, helping us respond in a way that aligns with our values rather than being driven by the heat of the moment. In high-stress situations, the ability to pause is a sign of emotional strength. It is a skill that, when practiced, can transform not just how we handle anger, but how we navigate relationships, conflicts, and challenges in life. Reframe the situation. Shift from "this is against me" to "what can I learn?" Anger often stems from the belief that something is unfair, disrespectful, or a personal attack. When we feel wronged, our brain defaults to a defensive stance, making it easy to see the situation as an attack rather than an opportunity. But what if we could shift our perspective? What if, instead of seeing anger as a reaction to something negative, we use it as a tool for understanding and growth? Reframing doesn't mean ignoring what happened or pretending it didn't affect us. It means choosing to see the situation differently, one that empowers us instead of trapping us in negativity. Instead of thinking, "why is this happening to me?" we can ask, "what is this trying to teach me?" This simple shift moves us from victim mode to a mindset of growth and resilience. For example, if someone criticizes you unfairly, the natural reaction might be anger or defensiveness. But if you pause and reframe, you might see it as a chance to practice patience, strengthen your confidence, or even identify areas where you can improve. If someone cuts you off in traffic, instead of taking it personally, you can choose to assume they're rushing for an emergency, preventing unnecessary stress. Reframing also helps separate intention from impact. Many times, people don't mean to hurt us, but our emotions interpret their actions differently. By choosing a perspective that assumes less malice and more misunderstanding, we give ourselves the freedom to respond with clarity instead of hostility. Every moment of anger presents a choice: to be consumed by it or to learn from it. The more we practice reframing, the more control we gain over our emotions, allowing us to navigate challenges with a sense of calm and strength. Control your breathing. Deep breaths signal the brain to stay calm. When anger takes over, our body reacts before we even realize it. Our heart races, our muscles tense, and our breathing becomes shallow and rapid. This is the body's fight or flight response kicking in, preparing us to confront or escape a perceived threat. The problem is, in most cases, we're not in actual danger. We're just emotionally triggered. And if we don't control our physiological response, our emotions will control us. The fastest way to regain control in a moment of anger is through intentional breathing. Deep, slow breaths signal to the brain that there is no real threat, helping to deactivate the fight or flight response. When we breathe deeply, we engage the parasympathetic nervous system, the system responsible for relaxation and emotional regulation. This simple shift in breathing can reduce tension, slow our heart rate, and create the mental space needed to respond rather than react. One effective technique is the 4-7 method. Inhale for 4 seconds, hold for 7, and exhale for 8. This not only forces you to slow down, but also gives your mind something to focus on other than the source of your anger. Another simple technique is box breathing, where you inhale for 4 seconds, hold for 4, exhale for 4, and hold again for 4 before repeating. By making controlled breathing a habit, you train yourself to remain calm under pressure. Over time, this becomes second nature, an automatic response to stress and frustration. Instead of letting anger spiral out of control, you create a moment of stillness, allowing clarity and reason to take the lead. With each breath, you reclaim control over not just your emotions, but also your actions and decisions. Detach from the emotion. You are not your anger, you are the observer of it. When anger arises, it feels personal. It consumes our thoughts, tightens our chest, and pushes us to react. But the truth is, anger is just an emotion. It is something we experience, not something we are. The problem begins when we identify too closely with our emotions, believing that because we feel angry, we must act on it. But in reality, we have the power to step back and observe our anger instead of being controlled by it. Detachment doesn't mean ignoring or suppressing anger. It means recognizing that anger is temporary, just like any other emotion. It comes and goes, but we remain. Think of anger like a storm passing through the sky. The sky doesn't fight the storm, it simply allows it to pass. In the same way, we can train ourselves to notice anger without letting it dictate our actions. One powerful way to practice detachment is by shifting from I am angry to I am feeling anger. This small change in language creates distance between you and the emotion, making it easier to observe without being consumed by it. Instead of reacting impulsively, you can acknowledge, I feel anger rising. What is it trying to tell me? Mindfulness techniques such as naming the emotion or visualizing it as a separate entity also help. Imagine placing your anger on a table in front of you, examining it objectively. What triggered it? Is it based on facts or assumptions? Is this worth my energy? By doing this, you move from being inside the emotion to observing it from the outside, giving yourself the space to choose your response wisely. The moment you stop identifying with anger, it loses its grip on you. Instead of being a prisoner to your emotions, you become the one in control. Use empathy. Seek to understand before seeking to be understood. Anger often stems from feeling wronged, misunderstood, or disrespected. In these moments, our natural instinct is to defend ourselves, to prove a point, or to fight back. But what if, instead of reacting with resistance, we responded with curiosity? What if, instead of assuming the worst about someone's intentions, we took a moment to understand their perspective? This is where empathy becomes a powerful tool in managing anger. Empathy is not about agreeing with someone or excusing their behavior. It's about recognizing that every person carries their own struggles, experiences, and emotions that influence how they act. Often the people who upset us aren't trying to harm us. They're simply acting out of their own fears, frustrations, or misunderstandings. When we pause to consider what might be happening beneath the surface, our anger loses its intensity. A simple way to practice empathy in moments of anger is to ask, why might this person be acting this way? Maybe the rude cashier is having a terrible day. Maybe the colleague who interrupted you didn't mean to be disrespectful but was caught up in their own stress. Maybe the friend who snapped at you is dealing with something you don't know about. These small shifts in perspective prevent us from taking things personally and help us respond with patience rather than aggression. Another approach is to listen actively. When conflict arises, most people listen to respond, not to understand. But when we truly listen, without interrupting, without forming a rebuttal in our mind, we open the door to deeper connection and resolution. By making empathy a habit, we don't just manage our anger, we transform the way we communicate, reducing conflict and strengthening relationships in the process. Choose your words wisely. Words spoken in anger leave scars that apologies can't erase. In the heat of the moment, it's easy to say things we don't mean. Anger has a way of making us impulsive, causing us to lash out with sharp words that cut deep. But once words are spoken, they can't be taken back. Even if we later apologize, the damage may already be done. That's why choosing our words carefully, especially when we're angry, is one of the most powerful ways to stay in control. When anger takes over, our brain goes into fight mode. We want to defend, attack, or prove a point. But before we speak, we must ask ourselves, is this necessary? Is this helpful? Will I regret saying this later? Taking even a few seconds to filter our words can mean the difference between resolving a situation and making it worse. One effective technique is to replace reactive language with intentional communication. Instead of saying, you always do this, or you never listen, which puts the other person on the defensive, try, I feel frustrated when this happens. Shifting from blame to expression makes it easier to have a productive conversation rather than an argument. Silence can also be a powerful tool. Sometimes the best response is no response at all, at least in the moment. Walking away, taking a deep breath, or even saying, I need a moment to think before I respond, can prevent regret later. Words have power. They can heal or harm, build or break. When we learn to control our words instead of letting our emotions control them, we protect our relationships, our reputation, and our own inner peace. Take a physical break. Distance creates perspective. When anger flares up, staying in the same environment can intensify emotions. The more we dwell on the situation, the stronger our frustration grows. Sometimes, the best way to regain control is to step away, physically removing ourselves from the source of anger to reset our mind and emotions. A physical break isn't about running away from problems, it's about creating space to think clearly. When we stay in a heated situation, our brain remains in fight or flight mode, making it harder to make rational decisions. But when we take a walk, step outside, or even move to another room, we disrupt that cycle. A change in environment signals to our brain that it's time to reset, allowing our emotions to settle. Movement is also a powerful tool for emotional regulation. Activities like walking, stretching, or deep breathing help release built-up tension in the body. Even something as simple as splashing cold water on your face or holding an object in your hands can ground you in the present moment, preventing anger from spiraling out of control. Another benefit of stepping away is gaining perspective. When we put distance between ourselves and the situation, we're able to see it with fresh eyes. What felt like an immediate crisis may seem less urgent after a short break. We may even realize that our anger wasn't about the situation itself, but about something deeper: fatigue, stress, or past experiences influencing our reaction. Taking a break doesn't mean ignoring the issue. It means giving ourselves the time and space to respond wisely rather than react emotionally. When we return, we do so with a clearer mind, a calmer heart, and a better chance of resolving the situation effectively. Practice self-compassion. Don't beat yourself up for feeling angry. Manage it constructively. Anger is a natural human emotion, yet many people feel guilty for experiencing it. They believe that being angry means they are weak, irrational, or out of control. But suppressing anger or judging ourselves harshly for feeling it only makes things worse. Instead of fighting against anger, we need to learn how to acknowledge it with self-compassion. Self-compassion means recognizing that anger, like any other emotion, serves a purpose. It signals that something matters to us, that a boundary has been crossed, an expectation hasn't been met, or a value has been challenged. The key is not to suppress anger, but to manage it in a way that aligns with our best self. One way to practice self-compassion is through self-talk. Instead of saying, "I shouldn't feel this way," try saying, "It's okay to feel angry, but I can choose how I respond." This simple shift in mindset reduces the shame and frustration that often accompany anger, allowing us to process it in a healthier way. Another technique is to treat yourself as you would a close friend. If someone you cared about was angry, you wouldn't tell them to just get over it or blame them for feeling that way. You'd listen, offer support, and help them find solutions. Extending that same kindness to yourself can make a huge difference in how you handle your emotions. Anger doesn't define you. What matters is how you channel it. By responding to anger with self-compassion, you create space for understanding, patience, and personal growth, allowing you to turn frustration into fuel for positive action. Commit to growth. Every moment of anger is a chance to strengthen your emotional intelligence. Anger is not just an obstacle, it's an opportunity. Every time we experience anger, we're given a choice: let it control us or use it to grow. Instead of seeing anger as a negative force, we can treat it as a tool for self-improvement, an invitation to develop patience, resilience, and emotional intelligence. Growth begins with reflection. After an angry moment has passed, take time to ask yourself, what triggered me? How did I react? Could I have handled it better? These questions aren't about blaming yourself, but about learning from the experience. The more we analyze our emotional responses, the more we recognize patterns, helping us respond more effectively in the future. Another way to commit to growth is by developing emotional regulation skills. Practicing techniques like deep breathing, mindfulness, or journaling can help process emotions in a healthier way. Reading about emotional intelligence, seeking mentorship, or even engaging in therapy or coaching can provide deeper insights into managing anger constructively. It's also important to celebrate progress. Managing anger doesn't mean never getting upset. It means improving how we respond over time. If you handle a situation better today than you did a year ago, that's growth. If you pause for even a moment before reacting, that's progress. Recognizing these small wins builds confidence and reinforces the habit of emotional control.